Okay, hi, my name is Karen Einstein, and I'm here today with the Independent Publishers of New England on our weekly Ask the Experts broadcast. We appear on Thursday mornings from 10 to 10:30, and we speak with experts in the field of publishing on a variety of different issues. Thursday mornings. Sorry about that. Today we have with us Deidre Randall, who's an incredibly accomplished singer-songwriter, poet, musician, publisher, and mother, and someone who works in lots and lots of different areas. Mothers never get enough credit. She's currently running a family business, which her father began decades ago, and I do believe he's a photographer, and he's working a lot in that field right now. She began working in the publishing industry. It's her second career after a long career in working as a social worker with mothers and children, and she had a particular interest in literacy, which led her into an interest in working with children's books, which we'll speak about later. She's also particularly interested in marketing, and through her interest in marketing, she became involved in the importance of selecting very good books for her publishing company. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you, Deirdre. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
Okay, it's a pleasure. And my first question is that I understand there are a number of different models of publishing businesses, and I was wondering if you could just kind of let us know what those models are and what type of model your family business follows.
Sure. Well, there are a number of different ways to get published nowadays, and my father, Peter, and I used to give talks on just that topic because it was getting confusing even for us. But the primary method that most people are familiar with is trade publishing, and that's where the trade publisher accepts your work, they pay you in advance, and make a contract with you for royalties, and hopefully the whole process goes very smoothly and your books are created and sold and you receive royalties. That is definitely one way of going, and the one that most people feel, says my work is worthy of someone else paying to publish it. The trade publisher has certain limits, obviously. They have to pick topics that are going to sell to a wide range of people and large numbers. So a book that might sell 5,000 copies wouldn't really work for them, but it probably would work for a smaller press. So then there are independent publishers who are not as large as the big trades, but they might be small trades or partial subsidies. They're going to do books maybe just a couple a year. They may receive grant funding or come up with creative solutions to get funds to put out their books, and they may have niche topics. Or there may be groups that are producing books that are willing to partner with the publisher and say, if you do the work of design and editing, we'll pay for the printing, and then we'll share the profits when it comes out, that kind of thing. We are an actual full subsidy publisher, so what we do is people present their materials, we evaluate them. If we accept them for publication, then we create a quote for pricing based on quantities and the way that we feel the material would be best presented for a commercial process. So if somebody comes in with their novel, we're not going to set it up in a coffee table style book. We're going to set things up in the correct style so that they'll sell, because books really, they need to sell. That's part of the process, and not just to earn the money, but to get the topic out there. And that's usually, most people that work with us have both goals, and sometimes more the second than earning the money. They say, I'd like to break even, but I want this story out there. I feel it's important.
Well, okay, very interesting.
So, and then the last style more and more people are knowing about, which is the print-on-demand or POD publishers, which are more an online-based service. It's pretty simple and quick to get a book with them if you've just got a text-only book or just a few pictures. More people are doing that because it's a way to get a book and have a few, and maybe they print 20 or 30 for friends and family. So if you're going to sell a lot of books, that's not the best way to do it because it'll cost a lot per book. But it is a good way to try something out, or to create a copy that you want to use for advanced review, that kind of thing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
And what sorts of professionals are working with you right now? I mean, I would imagine you have editors, designers,
Yes.
binders. How do you decide who works on which book? And how do you keep people when you know that, for example, you might need a children's illustrator for a little while, but you have no idea how long you're going to need them? That must be kind of tricky juggling that sort of thing.
Right. Well, I have a group of dedicated subcontractors. So these are all folks that have their own businesses, and they have dedicated a large amount of their time to us because we're busy enough to keep them busy. And they're also free to take other clients, and occasionally they may take something and then we get a project that I could have used them for, but that's when I pull in somebody who I work with less, but who is also available. So I have a good group. Some of them I've worked with for over 20 years.
Oh, great.
And in terms of the illustrators, that can be tricky. If you look on our website, you'll notice in the children's book section that a lot of our books are illustrated by 2 primary illustrators. But we've just added 2 more to that group. So now we've got 4 that we're working with. And you know, when you find someone who's an amazing artist who understands how to do book illustration, which is different than just drawing beautiful pictures, you want to keep them. So I do recommend the artists that I like, even if it means that, boy, we've got 4 books illustrated by that person, and all of them are different topics. You know, they're different, but this person just knows how to envision a story, and that's what you need.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
And you did mention that you were working, or you're releasing very soon, a children's book that's going to coincide with Easter. Would you like to?
Yeah, I'm going to hold that up and see if I can get that. This is the book.
An Easter surprise. Okay, now what was the inspiration behind that? And,
well, okay, that actually was an email that I got on my birthday 2 birthdays ago from the brand manager at the Lindt Corporation, and she had a great idea. She wanted to do a children's book and make it part of their Easter launch, and she felt that that would help to gain more attention for Lindt chocolate at Easter time. And I thought, boy, Lindt is big and their chocolate's so wonderful. And she said, well, in certain parts of the country they were, and they needed a product that would be universal for the whole country, that could just make their chocolate part of a holiday tradition for families. So so with that, you know, that's like a dream proposition for a publisher to say, we want you to create a book that will make a new holiday tradition for all the kids in America. And I said, yeah, I think we can try that. So they had a corporate legend about how Gold Bunny, the little foil-wrapped bunnies, are created. And we took that legend and fleshed it out into a full story, and the wonderful Susan Spellman down in Newburyport, who's done a number of our books, envisioned the story, and she was right there with us. And we changed the names of the children several times, and we considered taking the color purple out of the entire book at one point, because that's another company's color, which I won't mention, the other company. But now the book has been very well received, and this is actually the formal launch happening in the next 2 months. So if you have a Lindt outlet near you, you can go in and get an Easter surprise.
Wow, fascinating. That's something I would have never guessed. That's a great story. Speaking of seasons, what is there a kind of a typical seasonal aspect to the publishing company that you run, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, we have a number of books that are distributed by the University Press of New England, and that's Dartmouth's Press, and they have a traditional trade publishing house that they are administering, but they also distribute for other publishers, other university presses, and small trade houses. And I think we may be the only subsidy house that they that they distribute, I mean. And they invited us to be distributed by them, so that was really an honor. And they produce 2 catalogs a year, spring and fall, and we place books in the catalogs based on when the title should launch, and work with them to help promote and distribute the titles that way to a wider arena. And then some of my books are distributed more locally, such as history. We did a history of Rochester, New Hampshire a few years ago, and that's really primarily sold in the city of Rochester. So.
Okay, great. And kind of associated with that, how do you set publication dates, and how do you deal with delays?
Well, that's a good question. Sometimes an author will come to me and say they know when they want something to come out. You know, I want this out as soon as possible. Or we look at something and say when it should come out, and they have the wherewithal and the patience to do that. Or they come to me when they're developing their idea, which is ideal. I love to hear from people a year or two ahead and let me know what's coming, and then we talk about that. You know, if it's a book that, I just did a book about caregiving, a very funny book called Around the House by a woman from Durham, Harriet Swenson, and it's this collection of vignettes about her being the caregiver for her husband as he was fading away. But she just, the humor, and she, now I'm losing my train of thought, and here I am on a video call.
Welcome to the club, Deirdre.
Yes. Sorry, your question, and I was tying into the question, I know I was.
Yeah, no, thank you. You just made me feel very human.
Okay.
How do you set publication dates, and how do you deal with delays?
So with her, we looked at a number of options, and we brought it out, I believe it was near National Caregivers Month. And that just, luckily it was around the time she wanted it to come out anyway. I think she came out in the month before. And then we had another book come out, Wild Dolphin Rider, a children's book, and we published that on National Dolphin Day, which was April 14th. So I'm not above Googling topics, National Day of something or other, National Day of French Toast, you know, see if you can find, and there are websites that give these kinds of sort of invented holidays, but some of them do have validity, especially if there's a nonprofit group that's behind it that is using it as a way to promote their mission, and you can tie into that. Okay,
great. And imagine I'm an author, and let's just say I'm writing, I think I'm Umberto Eco, right? Reborn. And so I'm writing what I think is just going to be like the most sophisticated, fantastic classical piece. That's just going to blow everybody's socks off. And but actually, you read it, and you don't know how to tell me that I'm not Umberto Eco. But you see that it has potential, but you know it needs a lot of work. What would you say to me?
Well, I've had those conversations. I would say that I would try to match you with a good developmental editor.
Okay.
That's really what I would do, and I would not probably invest in myself into that process, except to help make sure that you had somebody good to work with, because I feel like if there's a story there, and if the author I can work with them. If they're open to help and change. If they aren't, I probably would say that we're just not the right house for you and you should keep searching. But if they're open and they're saying, please help me, I know this can be stronger, but I'm not clear what else to try next, that's the perfect author. And it's not always the one who's got a pristine, beautiful, perfect manuscript, but it's the good idea and the willingness to work hard and develop it.
Okay, great. And so for an author, imagine that you do get a good manuscript. What's the process that the manuscript goes through, and how do you, and I understand that you work with the authors throughout the process, so first you'll have an editor and then the illustrator and all of that.
Yes.
So could you talk us through a typical process?
Sure. So for an adult nonfiction title, say, we just did a book called The Builders of the Hoosac Tunnel, and that's by a gentleman who's written the seminal civil engineering textbook that is used in all the colleges around the country. And so McGraw-Hill said, well, you can do this one yourself. You'll probably only sell 4,000 or 5,000 of it. And he said, okay, I'll do it myself. So, you know, he's selling probably 25,000 of the other one each year. So this will be supplemental reading. There's a lot of history of civil engineering in the book, in addition to stories about the tunnel. So the first thing we did was editor. I have a wonderful editor who works for a lot of the big publishers, but she's based in Maine. We've used her for 40 years, and she went through and edited it, 1,200 footnotes. I mean, it was intense.
Wow.
So I'm lucky to have talent like that. And she worked very closely with the author, Cliff Schexnayder, and that editor is Catherine Brandis. And so Kathy and Cliff were on the phone when they needed to be, but essentially copy editing is straightforward. It's Chicago Manual of Style. So after we do that, the author sees the changes that are suggested. They take probably 98% of them. There may be a few things to fiddle around and work out and clear up, and then we have page design, so they can see 20 pages or so, what it might look like, different fonts, spacing, how are captions going to be handled, how do the photos look, are all the chapters going to open on a right-hand page, meaning we may have some left-hand blanks that we need to fill in with photos. Those kinds of questions are settled. Things that will repaginate the book, we settle in the sample page design. Once that's all approved, we lay the book out. A page proof goes to the author. They review, correct. It comes back. We make a confirming page proof, and then we're ready to submit to the printer. And the same process for the cover or a dust jacket. We talk about the design first. A design is presented, correction submitted, a revised design. Oftentimes we get the cover right in 1 or 2 tries. Sometimes 8. But not always 8. But we'll go to 8 if we need to. But usually we can get together and figure it out pretty quickly.
Okay, great. And do you find that just coincidentally there's a season when you get more manuscripts and less manuscripts, or it doesn't matter and they come in all times of the year?
Yep. Well, it really, my father will always say, it's spring, you get a lot of submissions. People are writing all winter, and then the weather gets warm, and they say, okay, I'm ready to get this off to a publisher. Truthfully, I'm busy all the time. I feel like our flow of work increases to the point sometimes where we have to ask people to wait a little bit before we can start the projects. But for the most part, it's steady. And I can usually at least begin talking with someone and give them a sense of when we can start, even if we can't start, that month. And I did forget one step on the steps of publishing. I have to mention, because and I'll mention my designer's name, Grace Pierce. She's my lead designer, and she does an amazing job. But I have indexing. You have to leave time for indexing, and we have a great indexer, our primary indexer, Melissa Stearns, who's a librarian in New Hampshire. So the indexing is the other. I just got a book, A History of a University, brought to me, had been put out in hardcover by the university, and someone brought it to me and said, can you create an index and put one in? They forgot to do it. So don't want to forget the indexing.
Okay, great. Someone has just written in with a question for you. Yes. What about announcing the date and putting it in Bowker and other metadata sites?
Yeah, well, I would put it in there as far ahead as you can, but that said, you don't want to keep changing that date. So if I would do it at least 6 months ahead if possible, because that can help pre-orders to start happening. And if you're going to list your book with a wholesaler, they're going to want to have the title data ahead of time so they can get it into their system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And another question, how can IPNE be most useful to publishers?
Wow, that's a big question. I think that IPNE is very useful at this point in providing a lot of education and collaboration around presentation of sales materials. They produce a catalog that I think that is the key to getting into some of the outlets, is having a catalog. And we don't actually produce one anymore. I have titles that really want that are listed with University Press of New England in their catalog. And others produce their own sales materials, but that IPNE catalog, I think, is a great tool. Those are the education and help with the sales, and then the trade show representation, right? There are IPNE tables at every book event, staffed around the clock. I mean, it's amazing to me. I don't know how you guys do it.
Well, we try. We can always use more help, Deidre.
Yes, I know. I know. I'm on the Portsmouth Poet Laureate board right now, so I have to finish one thing before I go on to another. But yeah.
Yeah, Maine seems incredibly active in terms of the whole writing profession. I'm always incredibly impressed by how well organized and how active everybody in Maine is. I mean,
yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's great. Let's see, you had showed me a coffee cup a little bit ago, which I found quite
Yes.
interesting. Would you like that to show
Yes,
everyone
there
and
it
comment on it?
is.
Portsmouth Community Radio.
Yes,
Okay.
Portsmouth Community Radio, and that is where I do an independent radio show. And you might think it would be about books, but it's actually about music and poetry. There have been book shows on the station, but most of the time authors appear on any one of a number of public affair programs. And I sometimes have had fiction authors on reading sections of prose. So mine's sort of a salon. We all talk about art and read things, or I play songs, the others do too. We read poems, and it's an hour on Monday nights from 6 to 7. So I've been
Great.
doing that since we went on air, and I always forget how far back that was, but I know it's been at least 13 years.
Wow. Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. I think it was October, and it was, 3 days notice. We're going live. Hey, your show should be on first. I said, okay. Oh my gosh, the website is wrong. Thank you for pointing that out, Charlotte. Charlotte has found the blog listing. It says Wednesday 7 to 8. That was our time slot for 10 years. And a couple of years ago, we moved it to Mondays so that we follow Democracy Now!, which is always airs from 5 to 6, Monday through Friday. So
Great.
that slot on Mondays now. So.
Wow, fantastic program to follow up on. But
I have a show coming up Monday night.
okay.
And I used to do this weekly, but now we have other hosts, so this will be my turn, first turn in a little bit here. But that's going to be a fun show with Jonathan Fraser-Lessard and Clara Berry and Kate Lee, who is the Portsmouth Poet Laureate.
Wow.
It'll be fun on Monday. And we do stream. You can listen online. We don't have this great video set up there, but you can hear us, which is fun.
Okay, great. Well, I'll tune in. And how long, on that subject, how long have you been playing music and composing songs and poetry? How long have you been with that?
I started playing guitar when I was 12 and writing poetry. I've always written poetry. And the two kind of started coming together. I wrote a few things when I was in my teens, but then it was really in my early 30s. I just sort of had an idea and got a song, and all of a sudden I thought, wow, I never thought of writing my own. I love to play other people's, and it just took off. It's just something that I find you can't really stop it. I've had periods where I don't go out and perform, but I'm always writing, and that's the part I really, really love, the writing. And when I get to perform, that's like icing on the cake. So.
Great.
And I'll be actually performing in Portsmouth at White Heron Tea on March 18th, which is a Saturday afternoon tea series that they do. Yeah. So I'll be there with my friend Jenny Riddle.
Great. When you tell me how to clone myself, I'm all ready. I don't know how you do it all. It's incredible. Okay, back to quickly, sorry, abruptly, because we're running out of time. Lots of questions here from people who are writing in. What should an author look for in a contract with a publisher, and what are some of the most common mistakes or things that are easily overlooked?
Boy, in my contract, it's pretty straightforward because I'm saying, we're going to do this job for you, and here's what we are going to produce. Here are the services. With trade publishers, boy, it's tricky. I know that they ask you to do things like give up all your rights for the entire universe for eternity. I know that kind of language exists in trade contracts, but right. I would say definitely have a connection to a good intellectual property attorney. Read whatever you can read, buy a book, get educated on the contract process, because that is where you can make or break your opportunity. And find out what you really have to accept versus what are they just going to push, hoping you'll accept it.
Right.
They're trying to do their best as well. So.
Okay, so that's kind of what an author should look for. What about a publisher? What should a publisher put down in a contract?
Well, I'm very clear to say how many books we're going to print, what the materials are going to be, what kind of paper we're going to print on, what's the weight of the cover material, what kind of materials is it going to be a sewn binding, adhesive, so that the quality of the physical book is clear. I'll state what our services are going to be, that we keep the files so that people have an opportunity to reprint within 3 years, or to decide at that point they want to have an archive of the files, which we can then give to them. So those kinds of things, and the length of time it's going to take, I like to say that we can do most books in 6 months. The Builders of the Hoosac was so large it took longer, but and others are a little quicker. But sometimes an author needs to stop in the middle for some reason, and we make it clear in the contract, if you are halting, that's okay, but we will keep going if you want us to do it. So that, because these are the stories you hear from people. The publisher never finished. They didn't really print all my books. So I just want to make sure that when people come to work with us, they know that they're going to get their books in a timely manner, that we're going to be ready to execute the project at their pace. And if they have questions, it's all spelled out. It's a short contract.
Okay, great. And then also, what should an author look out for a contract with an illustrator? What are the most common mistakes? And how about looking into the unlikely event of a contract between a publisher and an illustrator when the illustrator receives royalties?
I think the illustrator generally is going to get, the author and illustrator, oh no, my dog, they're going to have 10% to split, so they're each going to get 5%. So that becomes tough when you're just one or the other. It's nice when somebody is both, because then they get their full 10% if it's a trade publisher. In terms of the contract, if you're with a trade publisher as an author, they're going to match you with an illustrator. So they'll do that. If you're both, I think you want to make sure that you negotiate for that full share as both roles. Mm-hmm. Okay. The other part of the question was about the author direct to the illustrator, and if you're going that way, authors, illustrators generally want either a lump sum payment up front, or they'll take a partial and then they want royalties based on sales. And I've seen very high quality illustrators who prefer one or the other of those methods. The straight cost up front is cleaner, and again, if you want to reprint and your book continues to go and go and go, you're not constantly giving some of those funds away. So you're rolling the dice, and an illustrator may be reaching the end of their career and saying, royalties are not what I'm after here. I just need to have compensation now for the work I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Getting the sketches ahead and confirming those sketches before any full color work is done is crucial.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so get sketches, review them in person if at all possible, or have actual sketches sent to you. And they should be all on the same stock, all on the same paper. That's a big mistake that new illustrators make, is using different kinds of paper willy-nilly. That would be a mark of an inexperienced illustrator. They might be a talented artist, but they may not have done books before.
Okay.
So that kind of thing that can really plague you.
Okay, and then another question, which you might understand the question a bit better than I do. Who is the publisher, Randall or the author?
When they work with us, we're the publisher, but the author retains all their rights.
Okay.
Sometimes we have authors that create their own press, and we publish the books for them. Then we're the producer, and they're the publisher. And sometimes we co-publish, like with the museum. We just co-published with the Cape Cod Museum of Art. We did a book of photography that with a Cape Cod artist, and they co-published that with us. They provided funds, basically. We did the publishing, but they are listed as the co-publisher on the title page.
Okay, great. And I've noticed from your website you do a lot of Massachusetts history, which I'm not Massachusetts, New England history, and a lot of photography books. Are there any, and also a lot of children's books? What would you say kind of is the percentage of the different genres that you work with? Just rough ideas.
Yeah, well, I would say we're doing about anywhere from 3 to 5 children's titles each year, and then probably another 14 to 18 adult titles, divided between coffee table photography style and nonfiction illustrated history. Very occasional fiction. I've only done 2 novels in the last 4 years, and they both had national awards from Ben Franklin and from the Library Association. And so when I do take something, I like it. But fiction is really hard to sell, and both of these authors had the critical acclaim, and we did not sell thousands of copies of their books, but they were very happy with the critical acclaim, and that was our goal.
Right, fantastic, great.
So, one of them got a call from Random House and said, "We'd like to pick up your book, but can you change the characters from Greek American and make them Latino?"
Wow.
And the author said, "No, I can't." That's James Roman, actually, and his website is jamesroman.com, and he has 2 wonderful novels about Greek American characters.
Wow, that is an interesting request.
Yeah, isn't it? But
Yeah.
that's what they're looking for, and that's what they need to see. Is this was a book about an illegal alien, and they said, "Well, we want it to be about this other genre," and he said, "Well, I can't do that. That's the story,
Yeah.
So I can change the whole story." And he said, "And I don't know anything about that other culture. I know about this culture." So.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thanks so much for joining us. In our last couple of minutes, is there anything else that you'd kind of like to mention about anything? Your publishing, your music, your poetry, the radio show?
Well, we have a lot of exciting things going on in Portsmouth, and for people who do come to the Portsmouth area, there's a bookstore called Portsmouth Book and Bar, and they just created the Peter E. Randall bookshelf, and they feature our titles on the bookshelf, and we found that really, that community, that's one thing I think I should say to anyone who's a solo publisher. Make sure that you are out in the community and doing things that keep you connected, because I know I spend a lot of time at my computer working on things, but I have some great staff, and we have meetings and make sure that we're not just sort of off alone in our cubicles, because it can be hard. It's hard work to publish good books. But I think it's worthwhile work, and it helps me sleep at night, and I feel like I'm doing a little my part to try to make things better in the world. So that's really what I'm happy to be able to do that. And songwriting, volunteering on the radio, those are also things that I really enjoy. And being a mom, I love
I would imagine.
Very much. Very much. I'm a lucky person to have so many things that I can enjoy.
Well, thank you for sharing them with us. We're quite lucky to have you sharing them kind of here on the broadcast with us. Okay, great. Thanks, Deirdre.
All right.
So once again, this is the IPNE Ask the Experts broadcast, and we are on air every Thursday morning from 10 to 10:30. And we hope to see you next week. Thanks again, Deirdre.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.